Introduction to Drawing and Painting in Photoshop. You're going to create a document for print, and you're going to create 2 additional layers. So your document will have 2 layers and a background. In the very top layer, you're going to be doing your drawing, so you're going to set your foreground to black, and you're going to get out your brush tool. You're going to go to Windows and go to Brush Settings. What you want to change is shape dynamics and size jitter. You want to make them pressure sensitive. And then you're going to pick a brush that goes from thin to thick. And then you're going to practice pressing down to make thinner and thicker lines. If you go to the upper left-hand corner, you'll see that you can also change the shape of the brush. That's good for making calligraphy brushes. If you make the brush oval instead of round, it'll have different shapes when it goes in different directions. So I want you to play around with the brush settings a little bit. And then I want you to clear the page, and I want you to make some simple geometric shapes. Be hearts, diamonds, squares, circles, whatever, on the very top layer. Then you're going to, as soon as you've made your shapes, you're going to go to the magic wand tool, and you're going to select those shapes, and then you are going to go up to the select, and you're going to do select, modify, expand. I want you to expand your selection by 3 pixels. Hit OK, and then what you're going to do is you're going to do select, deselect, and then you're going to go down to the middle layer, and you're going to do select, reselect. So you're selecting the space inside the circle, but on the middle layer, the layer below where you drew the circle. And then I want you to do edit, fill, and you're going to pick a color, and you're going to fill the inside of that circle. And because you expanded the selection, it's going to look like the circle is completely filled, but it's not going to mess up any of your lines because it's in the layer below your drawing. Now I want you to play around with doing some shading by picking some darker versions of the same color, and I want you to mess around with your brush settings with the fuzziness. If you slide the slider all the way to the other side, you'll get a very fuzzy brush, and if you slide it all the way to the right-hand side, you'll get a very hard brush. You want a fuzzy brush. I also want you to play around on the top with the opacity of the brush, and I also want you to play around with the mixer brush, which is hidden under the regular brush. The mixer brush treats the paint that you already put down as if it's still wet, and whatever color you add to it mixes with the layer that's already there. So my blue and light blue are mixing when I use the mixer brush. The other tool I want you to experiment is called the smudge tool, and you'll see I'm going to find it right now. It's usually one of the hidden tools. So if I click those 3 dots at the bottom, I can find the smudge tool. It looks just like a little finger pointing, and you can use that to blend colors together. The advantage of using all these tools in the layer underneath the circle is that when you start smudging, you're not going to smudge the black lines of the circle. And because only that circle, there's the smudge tool, only that circle is selected, you can't accidentally go outside the lines. And I don't know if you remember when we were making our cityscapes, there was this little white gap where we filled the area. Because you expanded that selection, we got rid of that gap. So I want you to, within the next day or two, create a series of simple shapes that have highlights, midtones, and shadows in them. So shade them in so they look 3D. So I want you to just fill an entire page with these simple shapes. When you're done coloring them, you're going to save it as a JPEG, and you're going to turn it in via Google Classroom. So I'm just going to create a few more shapes here just to give you guys the idea. You can change the opacity of your brush at the top. If you go to the layer and you change the opacity, it's going to change the opacity of the entire layer. But if you go to the top and you change the opacity, it's just going to change the opacity of the brush strokes you're creating. And you can adjust the opacity all within the same layer of every brush stroke you create. The fuzziness is good for blending two colors. The blender brush is good for blending two colors, and the smudge tool is good. When you use the color picker, look at where your color is and go up to make the color lighter, down to make the color darker, and you can get colors all within the same color family. So that's basically how that's my introduction to how you're gonna learn to color in shapes, and we're gonna get more advanced in the next lesson. This is how professional illustrators and cartoonists are able to quickly color their artwork while keeping their original line work very clean. This is Rachel Winneberg, the Helpful Art Teacher, with another art technology tutorial.